Thank you, Todd.
Do you want this, Craig?
Sure.
Okay, I'll put it right there.
Okay, hey, I made it, man. I'm speaking at Intergroup. My name is Craig, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hey,
And,
Craig.
I've been sober since February, clean and sober since February of 1989. And I still have the same home group that I started with in Kent, the Kent group. It's old Kent now. When I started, it was just Kent. But, I started, it's really, I'm grateful for Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm grateful that you asked us to talk down here tonight. And I started drinking, and, I was thinking about this, like, this is kind of a history group, but I started really young. I started, I grew up in the 70s, and I grew up in a neighborhood. I had a pretty normal family life. My parents weren't alcoholic, but I grew up in a neighborhood like in Kent, and it was like a suburban neighborhood or whatever. And there were, I was like the younger of the kids. There was a lot of older kids, and I was young. And I started first smoking weed when I was probably 6 or 7 years old, and because the big kids on the block wanted to see what would happen to a little kid if he got high. And I was thinking about it earlier, and some of you might remember, some of you are probably way too young, but you used to buy marijuana. It was $10 for a lid, and it was 4 fingers in a bag. And I always would get ripped off because my fingers were so small. I was a little kid, but yeah, I loved it from the very beginning. I drank probably the first time that I drank and got drunk was shortly after that, and I drank basically, I guess, alcoholically from the beginning. I love the effect. I love the effect. I love the feeling. I still remember the feeling I had the first time that I got drunk when I was probably like 8 years old, and I chased that feeling, and this would be amazing if I can get through this, but 15 minutes. I can't even introduce myself. But anyway, I drank alcoholically from the beginning. I was a blackout drinker early on, like early teenage years. I got into other drugs as well. I moved out of my parents' house when I was 17 years old because I couldn't follow the rules. And we had an apartment with another kid that was 17. His mom signed for the apartment, and we were the only ones our age with our own place. So it was like the party started there and ended there. And we set up a basically shop. And anyway, it was just constant party. And I just drank that way from, it became a lifestyle, I guess, is the best. I'm trying to go through my drunk log fast, but because I could be 25 minutes in and still not sober to a talk. So I drank, like I say, blackout daily drinker. I lost jobs because of it. I had pretty good opportunities as a really young guy, and I wasn't, man, it was just drinking, and I love to drink, I love to party, and it was causing me a lot of problems in my life, and I didn't even realize I came to AA the first time when I was like 20 years old because a friend of mine got a DWI back then. They sentenced him to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I had a girlfriend at the time. See, I had a problem too when I was drinking. Like, once I start drinking, I don't stop. And so, like, until the party's over, and sometimes that wasn't the same day. So I'd come home like a day or two later. Like, I could go to the store for cigarettes and come home 2 days later and then wonder why she's so mad. Like, and not really, but really. And so she was sick of me not coming home, and I was in trouble one more time due to my drinking. My friend got sentenced to AA, and I went to AA. She said maybe it'd be nice if I went to a meeting or two. And I thought, well, I'll go to AA, no problem. I'm always trying to look for a way to get out of trouble when I'm in trouble. And so I went for about 30 days, and it didn't take, and I ended up drinking again. I remember an old guy, and everybody, come on, I was 20, so everybody was old, but I remember this guy told me, you're an alcoholic. I've heard a little bit of your story, and you're an alcoholic, and you probably need to be here. And I'm like, that was enough for me. I ended up going out, and I started drinking again, and I ended up drinking just the way I always drank. It's the same old story. I drank one beer one night. Like, I had been going to AA, and then I was hanging out at the bars with my friends drinking soda pop, saying how self-righteously drinking soda pop. I don't drink anymore, for 3 weeks or whatever it was. But I remember one night it was last call, and a guy brought 3 beers to the table. I was with 2 buddies, and he set a beer in front of me. And that's how I started. And I drank 1 beer, and then we're on the way home. I'm thinking, well, those guys in AA said they'd never stop at 1. It was last call. And I had that one, and that's how our minds work, and I started drinking again, and it turned into a daily thing again. And I ended up drinking for probably about another year. I don't even know. I mean, it was months or maybe close to a year. And I was, I went out one night and for a cheeseburger. This is exactly how my drinking went have been. I mean, it's like, this is just how it went. But I went to go get a cheeseburger, but instead of going to McDonald's, I went to the tavern. You know what I mean? And I had a few beers, and then I was like, screw the cheeseburger. Let's get some hard liquor. So back then you had to go to the cocktail lounge. And so I went to the cocktail lounge, and then a couple hours after that, I'm going around buying drugs back from guys that I sold it to earlier that day, like buying it, selling it wholesale, buying it back at retail. So that's how, screwy I was. And then I rolled in at 6 a.m. in the morning, the next morning, from going out to have a hamburger. And one more time I was in trouble, and this time I was pretty sure she was leaving, and because there was no fight. Like, we'd had all the fights. I mean, I could go on for hours about the fights and over my drinking. It's a drinking or me, You used to hear all that stupid stuff, and I knew she was leaving, and I knew if she left, I was more worried about what would happen to me, and because she kind of kept me out of trouble, and I ended up calling Todd, and Todd brought me to my first meeting, and that was in October of '88, October 10th, and I started going to meetings. I was a guest speaker the first night too, only they didn't ask me to be. I was still drunk. I'd been drinking all day, so I argued after everybody. Like, I argued my point after everybody. So if you go to a meeting and somebody argues after each person that talks, that person's drunk. Just so you know, but and I started going to meetings, and I did end up using. I didn't change everything all at once. And I ended up using one time after that, and I got to that point where it was all or nothing, I ended up using cocaine, and I was still running around with all the drug guys. It was like what I did for, anyway. And I remember it happened almost by accident because it was there, and I remember that feeling of, man, I need a drink. I have to drink, because for me it goes hand in hand. Like, those things go hand in hand. Any substance at all, and I want to drink. That's what happens to me. And I remember asking God to remove the obsession, and it was not as profound at the time as it is now. That's when I made the decision that this was going to be all or nothing, that I was either going to be in AA or I'm going to be out of AA. Like, it was no half measures weren't going to work for me. And I started going to meetings every single day. And I feel like I ran into the right people. I think I really feel like when the suspect is willing, when you're ready, when you're willing, the right people show up in your life. And I met some pretty hardcore guys, First Step, Alcoholics Anonymous guys that had a real heavy message, that message of weight and depth that I needed. I didn't really need somebody to give me a hug and say everything's going to be all right. I needed somebody to tell, the way I was when I was a kid, I needed somebody to tell me the truth about alcoholism. And so my first sponsor was Barney D from down in Kent, and he was like a Fish County step one guy about the disease, but also taught me about a higher power. I run around with Todd, and we would go, back then we went to all the meetings. Like AA, I sobered up pre-Google, like before Google, right? So if you wanted, like they say, now you just text your sponsor, I guess. You text or email or whatever. Back then you had to go to the meeting, because that's where he was at. If you called your sponsor, you'd get the message machine on the old, because he was at the meeting. So we went to meetings, we went to meetings all over, and I listened to the people of Alcoholics Anonymous explain the disease of alcoholism, explain the solution to the problem as well. And I started running around. I went to Green Lake with Todd and Holly, and Toby was up there. Toby was a guy that a lot of people didn't like him. I loved him. He spoke so directly to me, like I felt like I couldn't get away with anything when he was talking to me. Like he'd see right through me. Like they'd say, "How are you?" And I'd be like, "How does he know?" You ever feel like that with the old timers when you're new? But man, I love those guys, and they helped me stay sober, and they taught me Alcoholics Anonymous, and went to meetings all over. I sobered up at Long Acres Racetrack with all the old timers. You sit down there and gamble on horses and smoke cigars and cuss, and I talk about Alcoholics Anonymous. And they tell me stuff. I remember. I'll just share this. I think. Oh, I've got a couple minutes.
You're fine. 5 minutes.
I always say, like, I sobered up at Long Acres, and the difference. If you don't know the difference, do you know the difference between the people praying at Long Acres Racetrack and the people praying at church? The people at the racetrack really mean it. but I don't know if that's true or not. But my thought is that was a joke down there anyway. But I remember my sponsor used to tell me whenever I'd call him, Barney, I'd call him and I'd be having problems in my life, and he'd say, "Have you tried the higher power trick?" He used to always say that to me, "Have you tried the higher power trick?" And that meant, did you pray about it? Did you ask God for direction, basically? And so I remember we're sitting at Long Acres one day, and I asked him, "Do you ever try the higher power trick on these horses?" And he said, and he goes, "Craig, I never pray that they win, but I always thank them when they do." I always thank God when they do, And it taught me, like, not to pray for myself, but to be grateful. And I still think of that little line they told me all those years ago. When something goes my way, I always say thank you, because just to have that gratitude. I remember asking Toby the same question down there about, do you ever pray for, or do you ever try the higher power trick on the horses? And he'd say, "Oh yeah, I pray for the horses," And he goes, "That horse will take off and he'll get out and he'll go all the way around. He'll be way ahead of everybody and get to that last corner." And he says, "Okay, God, I got it from here." He goes, "Man, every horse in the field will come by to got me another thing." It's like, and I see that's my problem half the time. "Okay, God, I got it from here." I mean, I still at 30-some years sobriety, I make deals once in a while, like that works. But anyway, I think. Really, I'm super grateful for Alcoholics Anonymous. I've grown up in AA. I have a life today that's probably, that's really more than anything I could have imagined when I got here. I've been saying that for a long time, and I've been through the ups and downs of sobriety, as a lot of people have when you stay sober. Just because you get sober doesn't mean everything. It's all about learning to live life on life's terms, and I've been through a lot of life in sobriety, and I'm just and I have a great life, and it's due to Alcoholics Anonymous. It's like it's been ups and downs, but it's been a great life. And the alternative for us is not good. You know what I mean? That's the other thing. I've stayed in AA. I've never quit going to meetings, and they taught me that was another thing early on. They'd say, if you want to find out what happens, what is the one about people who don't go to meetings don't know what happened to people that don't go to meetings or whatever. I've never not gone to meetings, and it's been a real small price to pay for the kind of life that I have today. So I don't know. I'm just grateful, man. I'm grateful to be here. Grateful to be speaking at Inter. I'm grateful to be Todd's suspect. I mean, this guy brought me in my first meeting. We went to a young people's meeting in Federal Way. It's not even there anymore. We were young people. Can you believe that? But we run around to all the meetings together, and really all over Seattle and the South End, and some up in the North End, some in the East Side. So I used to have an East Side friend that said, "This is my friend Craig from the South End," because he was afraid what I'd say in the meeting. He's from the South End. Anyway, I'm grateful, and thank you guys for having us tonight.